growing protests all over Europe, the EU's zealous ambition with climate regulations, which is what is crushing the farmers and squeezing the average citizen, will just have to continue. The European Commission has decided that the average citizen of the bloc is just too stupid to understand that it is indeed they, the EU Commission, that knows how best to save the world, and by extension the ungrateful rabble that they oversee. Here is what Ursula von der Leyen, for example, had to say about the recent protests.
Our farmers deserve to be listened to. I know that they are worried about the future of agriculture and about their future as farmers. But they also know that agriculture needs to move to a more sustainable model of production so that their farms remain profitable in the years to come. Farmers need a worthwhile business case for nature-enhancing measures. Perhaps we have not made that case convincingly. The months ahead will not be easy. But I think we have an important opportunity now. It is clear to everyone in this House that our agri-food sectors, beginning with the farms, needs a long-term prospect and a willingness to listen to each other and to look for common solutions.
See, von der Leyen is signaling that the European Commission is shelving some of their plans, but only for now, meaning that for the moment they are putting on hold some of the key passages in their proposal for the new 2040 goal. This would have included a 30% cut to agricultural pollution, which, by the way, would have meant less crop production, which in turn would mean less food available for the masses, which in turn then could lead to starvation. But no biggie, right? Anyway, the climate zealots of the EU, though, are making it crystal clear. Despite the protests of the masses, they are maintaining that the case for climate action is beyond doubt and will require immediate planning. And so, instead of crushing the farmers completely, for now, they will instead turn their eye to you, the average citizen. They will let you bear the brunt of their climate ambitions. As reported by The Guardian, the EU is laying out their plan to cut greenhouse emissions by 90% by 2040. This means that the bloc will have to pump 90% less gas emissions into the air, a figure which includes the carbon it removes from the atmosphere. The EU Climate Commissioner said that the target sent a message to the world that Europe will continue to lead the way on climate action, tackling the climate crisis. There was frustration that they had to pull back from crushing the farmers because of the protests. A nature policy expert at the climate think tank said this: "It's hard to find a more fitting use of the metaphor cutting off the branch you sit on than witnessing farmers unite in efforts to undermine the very climate policies designed to protect them from the devastating impacts of climate change." The commissioner said that tackling the climate crisis is a marathon, not a sprint. We need to make sure everyone crosses the finish line and nobody is left behind. Essentially what he is saying is, don't you worry, farmers, we'll come for you eventually. So, let's then talk about what the EU Commission is actually going to try and do to meet its 90% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions. Here's a couple of examples. First, there will be a focus on renewable energy expansion. The EU has raised its binding renewable energy target for 2030 to a minimum of 42.5%, with aspirations to reach 45% as part of the revised Renewable Energy Directive. To do this, of course, that means you've got to keep on reducing the need for that pesky fossil fuels, i.e. oil, gas, and coal, and replace it with less reliable green energy sources. The Commission will also focus on energy efficiency measures, which are being promoted to reduce energy consumption and waste, which will help lower greenhouse gas emissions and reduce dependency on fossil fuels. They will phase out coal and attempt to reduce overall fossil fuel use by 80%, replacing them with renewable energy sources. The EU also has outlined plans to capture and store hundreds of millions of tons of CO2 emissions by 2050. There will be investments in clean technologies. The Next Generation EU Recovery Plan and the EU's 7-year budget will support the development of European clean tech industries. And then, of course, they will target the transport sector changes. The EU is setting a goal for all member countries to achieve a 10% share of renewable energy in their transport sector. Now, I want to focus in on the transport sector for the EU. You see, the European Union's Parliament has already formally approved a law to effectively ban the sale of new petrol and diesel cars in the EU starting in 2035. The law will require that by 2035, car makers must achieve a 100% cut in CO2 emissions from new cars sold, which would make it impossible to sell new fossil fuel-powered vehicles in the 27-country bloc. This regulation was passed by the Council, and the only country voting against it was Poland, while Bulgaria, Italy, and Romania abstained. There was a late amendment, though, supported by Germany and other countries, that would allow the sale of cars that run on synthetic fuels, which are considered net zero emissions if produced from renewable energy. However, this amendment does not change the overall direction of the 2035 ban on new petrol and diesel cars. If you think things are bad now in Europe, just wait until this rolls out. Aside from the fact that electric vehicles greatly reduce your ability to travel long distances and have been known to perform poorly in cold weather, including their ability to start and operate efficiently, for example, in Chicago last year, we had a pretty cold snowstorm. There were a lot of Teslas that got abandoned as EV batteries were unable to be charged in the cold weather. There were mass Tesla graveyards as drivers abandoned their cars at charging stations because they simply weren't working. In general, cold weather can reduce the range of electric cars by around 20%. This is because the chemical reactions inside a battery, which are responsible for storing and releasing energy, slow down in cold temperatures. But aside from this, there is a much larger problem at stake here. You see, there are serious concerns about the capacity of the power grid to handle the massive increase of energy demand that going full electric would have. There is a problem related to infrastructure, grid stability, and the need for significant upgrades to existing systems. One of the primary concerns is that the number of electric vehicles will grow faster than the total number of public charging stations, which will create a bottleneck for power companies and regulators unprepared for the surge in demand. Fully charging an EV battery requires a significant amount of electricity, which can add stress to the local power grid by increasing the amount of electricity a utility has to deliver. This concentrated pull of energy over an extended period can also shorten the lifespan of transformers by straining and overloading their capacity. There was a study done by EY Euroelectric titled Power Sector Accelerating E-Mobility on this very issue. They discussed that to handle this problem, there would be a need for tariffs during peak usage times. The study highlighted the importance of network tariffs, including time of use or TOU tariffs, to incentivize electric vehicle owners to charge their vehicles at off-peak hours. What this means is a TOU tariff will set different prices on electricity for different times of the day, typically dividing the day into peak, partial peak, and off-peak periods. The rates during off-peak hours will be much lower than those during peak hours, which means when you really need the power, you're going to pay through the nose to get it. And once all you have is electric vehicles at your disposal, you better believe that prices are going to skyrocket. The government will be able to charge you whatever they please, and you will have no choice but to accept it. I don't think people in Europe really have any idea what sort of pain is heading their way if this actually becomes a reality. Can you imagine? A transition to EVs will mean millions and millions of people relying on the electric grid in ways we've never known, and grid capacity will need to dramatically increase to avoid such strains. Now, of course, there are some experts that are arguing that the grid will be able to handle the future demand of transportation electrification with the right planning and adjustments. This will include taking advantage of up-and-coming charging technologies that will certainly save energy and carefully analyze energy load patterns to identify where and when the local grid has spikes in demand. All I can say is good luck. But don't worry, my European friends, there are attempts to make this happen here in the US as well. California, for example, is trying to mimic the EU's 2035 EV push, and our federal government keeps trying to do an end run around the American people to squeeze the oil and gas industry as hard as they can. So who knows? Maybe we'll all end up in the same car hell together. But in any case, the EU Commission is moving right along with their climate agenda. So watch out, Europe. Your quality of life for every citizen is certainly shaping up to look quite dismal in the near future. Time, of course, though, will tell. And that, my friends, will bring our episode to a close once more. From the To Be Frank show, I am Adrian. Thanks for watching, my friends. I'll see you all next time.